Hey Stanton students, welcome to your lecture on the Americas 600 to 1450. So this means we're covering the Aztecs and the Incas. Talk a little bit about the Mayans, but we covered them in the last lecture on the Americas as well. So this is the key concept we're covering: state formation. The key part is down here at the bottom. In the Americas, powerful states developed in both Mesoamerica and the Andean region. Mesoamerica means Aztecs. Andeans means Incas. Alright, so this is the area of Mesoamerica that the Aztecs covered. We're looking at modern-day Mexico. You can see down on the bottom left corner, we're at the southern part of Mexico, not quite to the Yucatan Peninsula. The Aztecs will eventually set up their capital in what's called Tenochtitlan, which was a city in the middle of this huge lake, Lake Texcoco. And this lake is not there any longer. It's been dried up, and now Mexico City sits in that area that was once this lake where the Aztecs built their empire. The Mexica are the cultural group that migrates from northern Mexico, what's today modern-day Mexico, down into the area of Tenochtitlan, and they are the forefathers of the Aztecs. And the origin story for the Aztecs is pretty interesting. What they claim is that the Mexica claimed that they had visions of seeing an eagle sitting on top of a cactus with a snake in its talons. And once they had this vision, or they saw this actually occur, then they would know that that's where they should build their empire. And so the story is that when they arrived in Tenochtitlan on Lake Texcoco, that's where they did see an eagle with sitting on a cactus with a snake in its talons, which today is the symbol that's on the Mexican flag. And so you see, Mexico is deeply identified with the history of the Aztecs. And so building the city in the middle of Lake Texcoco provided a couple of uses. One, they were able to trade with surrounding cities fairly easily because they're able to travel through the lake easily, and it provided a defense for them. It allowed them to protect themselves from possible attack from outsiders. So this is the city, Tenochtitlan. So they also had this agricultural system called chinampas, which literally means floating gardens. And so these were patches of land that were built in the lake that allowed them to basically use a form of agriculture called hydroponics, where you grow things essentially straight through water, or just only using water. And so this was very fruitful for them, very beneficial. They could grow up to 7 crops a year. So this gives you an idea of what the city of Tenochtitlan would have looked like at that time. This huge, massive city with roads stretching out to the mainland in the middle of this lake. And the Aztec Empire will run from 1428 to 1521, so not a long stretch of time, just short of about 100 years. And it'll finally be taken down by Hernán Cortés and his small Spanish army. And a lot of the descriptions we get of Tenochtitlan come from the Spaniards, and so they're suspect in that they show that bias already. But this is what he describes when they come to the city of Tenochtitlan and see this sprawling metropolis in the middle of a lake. He describes it as an amazing sight. And we're not sure, the exact number of the people who live there, but it was at least a few 100,000. The estimates were around 200,000 people living in this city in the lake. This gives you an idea of what chinampas look like. It basically, looks like rivers or causeways going through these patches of land. Makes it very easy to grow crops on. So the Aztecs did create an empire. They collected tributes from various ethnic groups, ethnic tribal groups in the surrounding area of Mesoamerica. And it might be helpful to contrast the Aztecs with the Mayans, who lived a little further south, near the area of Guatemala. In a couple of ways, that the Mayans were not an empire. They had many different kingdoms scattered around that area, but they were never politically unified. Not in the way that the Aztecs were. That did have a centralized authority with an emperor, and collected tributes, and conquered and controlled quite a few people. Up to 12 million people are the estimates. Alright, so if you haven't discussed the difference between tributes and taxation in your classes, this is a good time to make that distinction. You can see tributes as more oppressive than a form of taxes. Taxes we think of is a payment to the government in return for some benefits, right? That might be roads and infrastructure, sewer systems. Maybe it involves like some kind of protection from by the army, things like that. But a tribute doesn't include those kinds of things. A tribute is essentially payment for not being conquered. And so that's what the Aztecs often collected from surrounding groups. Is they collected tributes in return for not being conquered by the Aztecs, and in return they still had to govern themselves and protect themselves without any help from the Aztec Empire. I show you this picture because this will demonstrate how the social classes worked out in the Aztec Empire. Often clothing was mandated. People were not free to choose what they wore. They often had to wear a specific dress based on their social standing. Warriors were highly respected in the Aztec Empire, and depending on how well you fight in the Aztec Empire would depend on what social standing you had. And so they had what were called jaguar warriors, who, if they performed well and killed so many people in battle, they could reach the status of being a jaguar warrior and wearing the pelt or the fur as part of their outfit in battle. And that was like one of the most highly respected individuals, were warriors in the Aztec Empire. Alright, and so, as I mentioned, it is hierarchical. There were laws that regulated what people could wear. Merchants were also highly honored or valued in the society, and partially because merchants had quite a dangerous job in the Aztec Empire. It was typically one person who would go out or leave if they were traveling in a long distance, and there was a lot of ritual involved in when this person would leave and what would happen to them, because if they were caught by rival tribe close to the Aztec Empire, it was very likely that they would be killed. And so it was a very dangerous job for them. And so they were often, blessed before they left. And there was a lot of superstition about when they should leave. If they left on a certain day of the week, it was considered bad luck. And so merchants also were very highly valued for that reason. Women, even though they had no legal rights, they were honored for their childbearing, or if they had a son who was a warrior. And in accounts from the Spanish, there were often times when they described women who were protecting their homes during the raid of the Spanish on the Aztec Empire. Alright, this might be another good time to compare the Aztecs and the Mayans. They shared some of the same gods culturally, but if you want to contrast them, we might say that the Aztecs were more militaristic. Not that the Mayans did not go to war at all, but the Aztecs very much identified with battle and conquest, more so than the Mayans. Another part of their culture that was tied to the religion of the Aztecs was what was called the ball game, or in the Mayan language it was called pits. And this involved hitting a rubber ball that varied in size, a couple pounds, and you would either hit this ball with your hip and try and keep the ball in the air, and at some point perhaps knock this ball through a ring. I think a lot of people associate the Aztecs with sacrifice, human sacrifice, and that did occur. It's debated about how frequently that occurred, again because a lot of the accounts we have of when that happened comes from the Spanish. But sometimes they were criminals, sometimes captives, sometimes these were people offering themselves as a sacrifice. And the purpose was in the belief that their gods required nourishment, that they had gods of the sun and gods of the mountains and gods of the earth, and that these gods needed to be fed or nourished through the blood of individuals, through human sacrifice. Alright, this shows a picture of the god Quetzalcoatl, who is the feathered serpent god. He is a god that is half snake, half bird. And this is one of the major gods of the Aztec Empire. And I don't think I mentioned on one of the previous slides that had the first leaders of the Aztecs, who was Izcotl. So if you see that on the previous slide, Izcotl was considered the first emperor of the Aztecs, and he is the one that defeated the previous group that was there, called the Tepanecs. Montezuma was the Aztec emperor who was there when Hernán Cortés of the Spanish Empire invades the Aztecs. And so this is for those who might not find some parts of the Aztec civilization interesting. One thing is interesting is this interaction between the Spanish invading the Americas and finally encountering this huge empire that exists in the Americas that had not had contact with the Eastern world, the old world before. And we'll go over this more as we get into Unit 4 and talk about this interaction. But Hernán Cortés is able to defeat the Aztec Empire with a fairly small army, and Part of the reasons he's able to do so is because the Spanish have horses, the Spanish have steel, the Spanish have guns, and they're able to use these surrounding tribes of people who have had to pay tribute to this Aztec empire and have grown bitter as a result of it. They use those groups to help them defeat the Aztecs as well. And it's debated about what Montezuma and the rest of the Aztecs thought of the Spanish. It's often believed that they thought that they were gods, in particular this god, Quetzalcoatl. It's been said that some believe that Hernan Cortés was the god, or they believe that he was the god Quetzalcoatl when he arrived. But like I said, that is debated. They do believe that, or they know that they were humans. So. Okay, so now we move on to the Incas, who occupied South America, the most northern part of the Inca Empire, stretched from what's modern-day Ecuador, where you can see Quito up there, the capital of modern-day Ecuador, all the way down through Peru and into what's modern-day Chile, down near Santiago, which is the capital of Chile now, and Talca. And this empire, much like the Aztec Empire, stretches or lasts from 1438 to 1533. When, again, the Spanish, led by Francisco Pizarro, conquers the Inca Empire. You can see here these red lines represent the Royal Road, or the Inca Road. They're able to conquer quite a few people under their territory and build a substantial infrastructure. So the geographies of these two places are quite a bit different. The Aztecs settle in what's called the lowlands of Mesoamerica and southern Mexico. The Inca Empire is spread along the Andes mountain range. And they settle near Lake Titicaca. And one of the first Aztec, considered the first Aztec emperor, is Pachacuti. And he is... his name literally means he who shakes the earth. And just like the Aztecs Empire, they're able to control a population of millions of people. You're probably familiar with this site or images like this. This is Machu Picchu. And I mentioned the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, because it's believed that Machu Picchu was built as a palace of sorts for Pachacuti. Alright, so the Inca Empire was highly organized and bureaucratic. It had a central authority, much like the Aztec Empire. And it was comprised of conquered peoples around the areas. Cuzco was the unofficial capital of the Inca Empire, and of those roads that you on that previous slide of the map that they had, there were two main roads. You could see that the Inca Empire stretched fairly long north and south. Not so much east and west, partially because of the Andes Mountains that run along that western coast of South America. But the two main roads had a combined length of almost 10,000 miles. And the official runners were individuals within the empire who had the task of running messages through the the Inca Empire. So something interesting about the organization of the Inca society is that there wasn't any significant merchant class. It doesn't mean that they didn't conduct trade, but there wasn't a class of individuals that you could specifically point at and say that they made up the merchants. This was done by the government, who had other roles in society as well. The royal mummies refers to a few individuals that were preserved. One in particular, which has been called Juanita, was a small child that was made up as an offering. But as we'll see on the next slide, there wasn't anyone. There wasn't the sacrifices of humans that we saw in the Aztec Empire. The majority of the people in the Inca society lived under a forced labor system, which made it convenient for when the Spanish arrived and began setting up another forced labor system called encomiendas, which we'll learn about in the next unit. So the primary god was the sun god called Inti. And most of you have probably seen a symbol familiar to Inti. It's the symbol of the sun that you can see on the Uruguayan flag, for example. And as I mentioned, they sacrificed animals and agriculture, meaning they either burned agriculture and killed animals, but did not do it to humans to satisfy the god. And you can probably compare much of the religion of the Incas to that we've seen so far in the class. Other religions like Zoroastrianism and the other monotheistic religions that follow that there's this clear division of good and evil, and that there's an afterlife that rewards good behavior and punishes bad behavior.